Welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the most incredible survival stories in aviation history. Imagine being on a plane halfway across the Atlantic Ocean and suddenly running out of fuel. No engines, no backup, just a massive jet gliding through the night sky with hundreds of lives at stake. This is the true story of Air Transat Flight 236, and how two skilled pilots turned what seemed like certain disaster into a miracle landing. Stick with us to the end, because this is a ride you don't want to miss. Air Transat Flight 236, trouble begins. On the night of August 23, 2001, Air Transat Flight 236 prepared for what was supposed to be a routine journey across the Atlantic. The aircraft was an Airbus A330, one of the safest and most advanced jets of its time. Its mission, a 7-hour flight from Toronto, Canada to Lisbon, Portugal. On board were 293 passengers and 13 crew members, most of them expecting nothing more than a long, uneventful night flight. At the controls sat two very different but equally skilled aviators. Captain Robert Pichet, age 48, was a veteran with over 16,000 flight hours under his belt. Known for his calm demeanor, Pichet had flown countless aircraft types during his career. Beside him was First Officer Dirk de Jager, just 28 years old, but already an accomplished pilot with 5,000 hours of flight experience. Together, they formed a strong, confident team, fully capable of handling whatever challenges the skies might bring. The aircraft itself is practically new, delivered only 2 years earlier. At that time, the Airbus A330 was considered a marvel of modern engineering, equipped with state-of-the-art navigation systems, advanced safety features, and an impeccable maintenance record. Before departure, it had passed all required checks, giving both crew and passengers no reason for concern. At precisely 9 p.m. local time, the jet lifted off from Toronto Pearson International Airport, climbing steadily into the night sky. Inside the cabin, passengers settled in. Some browsed through magazines, others watched in-flight movies, while the majority eventually drifted into sleep. For the crew, it was business as usual, monitoring instruments, communicating with air traffic control, and keeping the flight on schedule. 4 hours into the journey, Flight 236 was cruising at 39,000 feet, right over the heart of the Atlantic Ocean. The vast, dark waters stretched endlessly below. The autopilot managed most of the flying, leaving the pilots to perform routine system checks. Everything seemed calm until something unusual appeared on their screens. The instruments connected to the right engine, Engine 2, began showing abnormal readings. The crew noticed a combination of 3 unusual signals: high oil pressure, low oil temperature, and low oil quantity. This was puzzling. Under normal conditions, oil pressure remains stable, oil temperature gradually increases, and oil quantity should remain consistent. Having all 3 readings out of balance made little sense. Concerned, Captain Pichet and First Officer de Jager immediately turned to their reference manuals. Airbus had designed extensive procedures for nearly every in-flight scenario, but this particular set of warnings didn't match any checklist. It wasn't something they could fix with a standard step-by-step solution. Unsure of what they were facing, the crew reached out to their maintenance control center back in Canada, describing the situation in detail. Yet even the ground experts were baffled. No one could recall encountering this exact combination of warnings before. With limited options, the advice given to the pilots was simple but unsettling. Continue to monitor the situation. For now, everything else appeared normal. Both engines still produced thrust, the flight path was steady, and passengers remained unaware of the developing problem. But deep inside the cockpit, the seeds of a crisis were quietly taking root. One that would soon push both pilots, their aircraft, and every soul on board to the absolute limit. Air Transat Flight 236, the fuel crisis. At first, the cockpit crew of Flight 236 tried to stay calm. Strange readings from the right engine could easily be explained by a faulty sensor. Modern aircraft often send out occasional false warnings, and with all systems otherwise functioning normally, Captain Robert Pichet and First Officer Dirk de Jager assumed this was one of those harmless glitches. But within just 30 minutes, a far more troubling alert appeared on their screens. This time, it had nothing to do with oil pressure. It was a fuel imbalance warning. The indicators showed that the amount of fuel in the left wing tank and the right wing tank did not match. In an aircraft, balanced fuel is essential, not only for proper engine function, but also for maintaining the plane's stability in flight. To correct the problem, Captain Pichet made a standard decision. He opened the cross-feed valve, a system that allows fuel to transfer from one tank to another. Gradually, the levels balanced out. The warning disappeared, and for a short time it looked as though the issue was resolved. Both pilots breathed a little easier, but their relief didn't last. Barely 10 minutes later, yet another warning appeared, and this time it was serious. The alert read, "Low fuel." At first, they wondered if this too could be a sensor malfunction, but the readings were unmistakable. The right wing tank was draining far too quickly. The numbers were dropping at an alarming rate, and the crew soon realized a chilling truth. This was no false alarm. Even if they combined all remaining fuel into one system, it still would not be enough to reach their destination in Lisbon. Somewhere over the dark waters of the Atlantic, Air Transat Flight 236 was running out of fuel. The cockpit atmosphere grew tense. The pilots scanned their charts for possible alternatives. In the middle of the Atlantic, options were limited. The only possible place within reach was the Azores, a remote group of Portuguese islands used primarily as a stopover for transatlantic flights. The closest suitable runway was at Lajes Air Base, located on Terceira Island. Without hesitation, Captain Pichet contacted Santa Maria Air Traffic Control to declare an emergency. By this point, the aircraft carried only 7 tons of fuel, barely 6% of its full capacity. Worse still, it was burning away at an alarming rate. The question was no longer whether they could continue to Lisbon. It was whether they could make it anywhere at all. Inside the cockpit, both pilots wrestled with a critical question. Why was the fuel disappearing so quickly? If this wasn't a faulty reading, the only explanation left was a fuel leak. But identifying a leak in the dead of night, over the endless ocean, was nearly impossible. The crew peered out the windows, hoping to catch sight of fuel streaming from the wing. But the darkness outside gave them nothing. Soon, the numbers told the story on their own. The plane was losing 1 ton of fuel every 5 minutes. At that rate, even the Azores were beginning to look uncertain. Every decision from that moment forward would be a race against time. Air Transat Flight 236, a deadly silence in the sky. Then, things took a turn from bad to worse. As fuel levels continued to drop, the right engine suddenly caught fire. The cockpit warning alarms blared, and the calm of the night was shattered. In the cabin, passengers woke in confusion and fear. Panic spread quickly as word traveled that one of the plane's engines was gone. With only a single engine still functioning, the Airbus A330 could no longer maintain its cruising altitude. Captain Robert Pichet began a slow but steady descent, trying to balance the aircraft while conserving every last drop of fuel. Meanwhile, across the ocean on Terceira Island in the Azores, emergency crews scrambled into action. Fire trucks lined the runway. Medical teams stood by, and the base prepared for what seemed like an inevitable disaster. But the nightmare was far from over. As the aircraft pushed onward toward the islands, the last remaining engine began to sputter. And then it too failed. Suddenly, Air Transat Flight 236, once a powerful jetliner carrying 306 people, became nothing more than a 400,000-pound glider silently descending through the darkness. Inside the plane, the situation grew even more terrifying. With both engines shut down, all primary electrical systems failed. Lights went out, screens went dark, and the cabin was thrown into near silence, broken only by the sound of rushing wind outside. For passengers, it felt like the end. Fortunately, modern airliners carry an emergency backup system known as the RAT, or Ram Air Turbine. This small propeller, powered only by the rushing air outside, deployed automatically. It generated just enough electricity to keep essential cockpit instruments and hydraulic controls alive. The pilots had limited tools, but at least they weren't flying blind. Still, the challenge ahead was staggering. The Azores were 120 kilometers away, and the plane had to cover that distance by gliding alone. Every maneuver, Every adjustment in pitch meant the difference between reaching land or ditching in the icy Atlantic. The descent was unforgiving. The aircraft was losing altitude at 2,000 feet per minute. At that rate, Captain Pichet and First Officer Dirk de Jager knew they had maybe 15 minutes of airtime left. Every second brought them closer to either the safety of a runway or the deadly waves below. Against all odds, the island of Terceira finally appeared in the distance. Relief swept through the cockpit, but it was quickly replaced by another problem. The A330 was still far too high to land safely. A nosedive would give them the right altitude but also push their speed beyond control, almost guaranteeing a crash. In a bold and risky decision, Captain Pichet guided the plane into a full 360-degree turn. The maneuver bled off altitude while keeping the aircraft close to the runway. But even that wasn't enough. The giant jet was still coming in too high, too fast. Thinking fast, the captain executed a series of sharp S-turns, weaving side to side like a car zigzagging down a steep hill. Each turn burned off more altitude while giving him precious moments to line up with the runway. The passengers inside held their breath, unaware of just how close they were flying to the edge of survival. Air Transat Flight 236, the impossible landing. This was no ordinary landing. Without engine thrust, the Airbus A330 had no power to extend its flaps fully, no reverse thrust to slow down, and no margin for error. The pilots were attempting something rarely ever seen in commercial aviation, bringing down a fully loaded jetliner purely as a glider. As the runway at Lajes Air Base came into view, every second felt like an eternity. Passengers sat frozen in their seats, bracing for impact. The pilots kept their focus, controlling the massive aircraft with precision. Then, at exactly the right moment, Captain Robert Pichet brought the jet down. But the landing was brutal. The aircraft hit the runway with overwhelming force, far harder than a normal touchdown. The impact was so severe that 8 of its 12 tires exploded instantly, sending rubber and debris flying in every direction. Sparks shot out from beneath the landing gear as metal scraped against the asphalt. For a moment, it looked like disaster had struck. The massive jet skidded violently, struggling to remain on the runway. The friction and sparks ignited a small fire in the landing gear. But this was Lajes Air Base. Emergency teams had been waiting. Within seconds, fire trucks raced toward the aircraft, dousing the flames before they could spread. Against impossible odds, the A330 rolled to a complete stop. When the plane finally came to rest, there was silence. Shock, disbelief, and then relief swept through the cabin. Against every expectation, all 306 people on board, 293 passengers and 13 crew, had survived what should have been a fatal crash. Not a single life was lost. It was nothing short of a miracle in aviation history. The investigation that followed uncovered the cause of the near disaster. The problem began long before Flight 236 even left the ground. During routine maintenance in Toronto, mechanics had replaced a component in the right engine. The revelation was alarming. A single maintenance error had nearly cost the lives of over 300 people. As a result, Airbus quickly redesigned its monitoring systems, adding safeguards that would allow pilots to detect fuel leaks in real time. This upgrade ensured that no crew would ever face the same terrifying uncertainty again. As for Captain Pichet and First Officer Dirk de Jager, their actions became legendary. Guiding a powerless jet for nearly 20 minutes, they performed what remains the longest glide ever recorded by a commercial airliner. Their calm under pressure, precise decision-making, and extraordinary flying skill turned certain tragedy into one of aviation's greatest survival stories. In recognition of their remarkable achievement, both pilots were awarded the prestigious Superior Airmanship Award. Their story continues to be studied in aviation schools and safety courses around the world, a reminder of human skill, resilience, and the razor-thin line between disaster and survival. This story of Air Transat Flight 236 is a powerful reminder of how skill, training, and calm under pressure can turn the impossible into survival. What do you think you would have felt if you were a passenger on that flight? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this story fascinating, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe for more amazing aviation stories, and share this video with friends who love incredible true events. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.